Thanks, Ava. Hopefully I don't think I'm breaking up. Let me know in the chat if I am. Appreciate the opportunity and welcome everybody to this great conversation we're about to have. Um, Vicky, if you want to pull up the slides, that would be helpful.
Will
So
do.
we are about to release a report at the end of this month that builds on some research that we did in 2018 related to employers and high school internships. So if you want to go to the next slide. So we found in 2018, about 30% of businesses offered high school internships. And we see a small increase in that from 2018, 30% to 38% in 2023. Altruism plays the biggest role in business decisions to hire interns, meaning that this is something that employers look at. It's good to have. It's also can provide return on investment, but overall, there are altruistic intentions around providing these internships for students. 89% said they wanted to help the individuals gain skills, durable skills, soft skills, however you want to describe that. And then 85% says they wanted to expose students to careers that may otherwise have been inaccessible to them. Next, please. So we all recognize that there are some significant challenges in implementing high school internships. They're great in theory, like you can all understand and conceptualize a young person being on site at a business, learning, receiving mentorship, learning new skills, and then translating them to the classroom and then figuring out how that relates to their career pathway. But there are real concerns for organizations that host these. The three biggest ones are determining the work best suited for interns. So how do we know that the work is actually relevant for the student and then also relevant for the business? And 43% of businesses felt that they were having difficulties figuring out how best to find work for these interns. 42% said one of their biggest challenges was attracting qualified interns. So how do you determine whether or not you're getting students that are actually interested in the fields that they're working in versus a student that might want to major in theater arts but now is working at an accounting firm? How does that mismatch work? And then scheduling around the intern's availability. Obviously, if the student is a 16 or 17-year-old enrolled in high school, their availability during normal business hours may be compromised given what their school obligations and responsibilities are. So that can be a challenge as well. We also notice transportation, managing them once they're in-house. These are all kind of concerns that businesses have said they have. And so what are we going to do to sort of mitigate those concerns and improve conditions to create opportunities for students? And last, please, Licky. So one of the ways that we wanted to explore and examine this is how employers can use this as a strategy for talent development and DEI. A lot of these efforts existed prior to 2020 to develop talent pipelines and be more inclusive, but were accelerated post George Floyd. And so our research wanted to look at how sustained were these initiatives and how did they incorporate high school internships in these initiatives around DEI. And we found that 86% of the respondents said that having high school interns strengthen their industry pipeline. Over 80% said that they filled their employer pipeline with diverse candidates. And then over 3/4, 78% said that they enhanced their organization's diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. So we really view this as an opportunity, not just for talent pipeline development, but for helping companies with their diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And so that's the real ROI that can be gained by offering these types of opportunities. I'm pleased to have a panel of distinguished colleagues who are doing such great work in the field. Susan and Doug from Prep KC, Taylor from New America, and then Deanna from Accenture. I'll let them introduce themselves, and then I'll ask them some questions to guide our discussion. So let's start with Susan from the great city of Kansas, or great state of Missouri, Kansas City. Take it away, Susan.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, actually, most of you know Kansas City is a bi-state city, and Prep KC actually works very intentionally with a handful of urban school districts, both sides of the state line. And you're going to hear a little bit more about this later, but in our region is really a patchwork of districts. We don't have one unified school district. And so there's a lot of difficulty in creating scale and probably affordability. And so we've been working on that for a while at Prep KC, and I'll share more later.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Doug Elmer. I work with Susan at Prep KC, and my work really revolves around helping our teams out in schools in the community connect employers, students, and schools to think through what high-quality internship opportunities look like, and the role that we play as both kind of matchmaker and then program builder and program support. So excited to share a little bit about what we've learned through our work here in Kansas City today.
Taylor?
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. My name is Taylor White. I come to you today from Washington, D.C., where I work for an organization called New America, and we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, essentially a think and action tank. I manage a body of work there called Post-Secondary Pathways for Youth, where we think about a range of strategies to improve the transitions that young people make from high school into whatever their next step might be on their way to adulthood. And in particular, I manage an initiative called the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship, which is not actually focused on internship, but thinks a lot about how we create high-quality work-based learning opportunities in pipelines or kind of systems for young people. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. And Deanna, batting cleanup.
Sorry about that. Hello. Hi, I'm Deanna Noggles. I am with Accenture. I am the Dallas and North America local market lead. So I am excited to join you. Accenture is a global professional services company. We help our clients imagine and invent their future. We have over 740,000 employees worldwide. We've been recognized as a global leader, global business leader, responsible public company, and good corporate citizenship, good corporate citizen. Inclusion and diversity are fundamental to our culture and company values. So some of the very stats that you mentioned around some of the programs with internships and creating the pipeline is the very foundation of many of the things that we do. So I'm excited to share more.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're excited to share more, Deanna, because I'm going straight to you for our first question. Can you tell us what are the key elements of a successful high school internship program from your perspective?
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So a high school program. So at Accenture, before I go into the details, Accenture, we have what we call our impact hiring program. And we have a full team that focuses on what we call our Skills to Succeed initiatives. And those are categorized into high school students, college students, and then young adults for apprentices. So those types of programs are called. So for our high school students, to answer your question, we call that our Learning to Lead program. So what that is we work probably, I would say, across North America in about 16 different cities, partnering with what we call our partner organizations, many of which are higher ed, nonprofits that focus on first generation students, as well as those that may be underrepresented in corporate America. We host a program which we call Learning to Lead. So it's not that we're hiring them. They do receive a stipend, but they have an opportunity to come into corporate America and learn alongside true professionals in consulting. So the way it looks is we actually give them what we like to call almost like a capstone project, where they use business fundamentals such as marketing, finance, presentation skills to solve problems that are either in their community that they come up with an issue and that they have to solve. But then we also ask them to use technology. We're a technology company. So how are you using technology to solve some of these very problems that you are solutioning? They then do a pitch. They share their big kind of solution, right? Their business plan as to how they're going to implement the solution for their problem, or how they address the problem or the challenge in their respective, in our community or in the world for that matter. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to have 16 to 18-year-olds on site. We have probably about 400 students across North America that do that program over the summers.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And as we talked earlier this week, you had mentioned that there's 4 days where they're actually working in the office, and then that 5th day. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the 5th day and that day of reflection and learnings?
Yeah, so that's for the college students. So for the high school students, they work with us 4 days, or they learn with us 4 days a week. So it's a 20-hour program, and in that program, they have about 3 excursions. They go to an actual client site, and go behind the scenes and learn about that. We have a cultural impact day where they may go to a science center, as an example, to really get them to see how some technologies even be used in science. We then have a fun day. We have a fun day of going out and connecting within the community to serve. So they'll do community service work as well. Now, if we switch over to the high school students, is what you're referencing. I'm sorry, college students. If we switch over to the college students are students that we provide through work experience. So we provide work experience where they work with us 10 weeks in the summer. We call it our internship program for Skills to Succeed students. And we're looking for that growth mindset. We're looking for students who want and interested in learning how to problem solve and do consulting work using technology, working with our clients. So given that example, they work on our projects. Some are internal projects, some are external projects. They work within those projects for 4 days a week. And then on that 5th day is the day that is more of a learning and building. So we put those rapper program and skill set around them on that Friday. So they learn about technology, they learn about networking, they have opportunities to go out and serve, they have connection opportunities with each other. So those are the college students that we hire for what we call our Skills to Succeed internship roles, which are 3 areas: business analysts, so they hire in as business analysts, technology consulting analysts, or either operations analysts. So I know that's a lot.
Yeah, no,
so
that's
those
a
are
lot.
the 2 programs.
But let me summarize and say, from I think what I heard is that there's meaningful projects, there's a
Yes.
very welcoming community, there's
Yes.
networking and mentorship, and there's like, and I'm putting this in there for you, but there's clear expectations and feedback. There's a feedback loop, so that's not just like the student comes in and wandering aimlessly, but that there is that connection there, and that community where that student feels engaged, and it just sounds like a wonderful experience. Really, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
So Susan, can you tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, what's the return on investment for companies to engage with high school students and interns? And if we're out there trying to recruit more employers to join this effort and become business partners, what are the best ways to encourage them to do that, based on your experience and the business partners you developed with Prep KC?
Well, yeah, you're going to hear me say some of our lessons learned in questions you just asked, Kevin, are very much aligned with the opening overview that you gave, but I'll go a little deeper on some of those. We have, now that we've had a few years of working with, we work with 20 urban high schools, and so we have a wide range of business and industry partners as it relates to internships and other what we call immersive workforce experiences for kids. I think we have a number of observations about what has motivated employers to move to high school students as part of their investment in their upstream pipeline. And one of them, in our experience, I would label as desperation. There are some parts of business and industry that just really haven't been able to find the talent that they need to conduct the business they want to conduct at scale. And we have at least one great example in Kansas City of a very large company with a lot of engineering and skilled trades work going on there. And the CEO has told us that the reason he's working closely with us is because they've had to turn down contracts because they don't have the entry-level talent or the scale of talent that they need to be able to grow their company. I think there's a whole nother kind of field of conversation about the power of grow your own versus trying to import from other places and hope they stick in your city versus returning and working where they came from. So that need to really find a way with a relatively short cycle time to get talent that they need, I think is one of the examples. Another example of that in Kansas City region is some work that we've done on helping develop a first responders pathway. because fire, police, EMT, those are all very short-staffed right now. And they're really looking for getting more young people interested in moving into that kind of career. Another motivation that we see is the opportunity for the employer to take a first look at the promising young talent. So if you've got a 16, 17, 18-year-old, on 19-year-old even, you know, in an internship, you really do get a close look at that young person. Someone mentioned growth mindset. You get to see this young person in action. Does she or does he really look for problems to solve? And do they know how to manage that process and communicate what they believe would be a solution? So that first look at emerging talent is another motivator. We also, to your point earlier, the kind of headline that you gave us from the report you're working on releasing is the commitment to try to diversify your workforce and attract more diverse entry-level talent. And that is, of course, around race, but it's also around gender inequities and some career pathways. And actually, one of our experiences with a number of our big hospital systems in healthcare and health science is the fact that they're looking everywhere for dual language healthcare workers. And so our population of kids that are mostly Black and brown from families that probably haven't always had access to healthcare, the kids are pretty motivated to go in and be part of that system and take the skills that they bring, the perspectives and the dual language in many cases that they take into the workforce. And then, of course, the final one that you mentioned also is just that corporate social responsibility commitment that I think threads through all of these others. You could take these four and probably several more, and you could just restack them based on different, what is the top priority for different companies to get engaged in paid high school internships. To go on, probably the best way to convince companies, in our experience, in some cases, we haven't had to convince companies. They've come to us and said, we're now 18 years old. Prep KC is an 18-year-old intermediary working specifically in urban education. And so we've had a while to learn some lessons, to demonstrate some impact. And we've had, for example, the Kansas City Metro Bar Association came to Prep KC and said, we want to stand up a summer paid internship for juniors and seniors in high school because we need more diversity in the legal workforce going forward. And so they came to us and asked us, and 5 years ago now, and we've been really having wonderful experiences with a growing number of young people that find their place to serve their community in their internship experiences, paid summer internship experiences. In other cases, I would say we have learned sometimes to start small and grow toward an internship, a paid internship. So in some cases, it's a matter of inviting a wide variety of professionals in the workforce of the Kansas City region to just talk to kids, do a classroom speaker, do what we call a career jumping, which is also like speed dating for a career. And that could be anywhere from third graders through eighth graders, just to really get them a sense of the fact that they can have real impact on kids just by dipping their toe into this idea of connections, and then later on growing the relationship out to the possibility of paid internships.
Yeah, so eloquently stated, as always, Susan. Really appreciate that. For your colleague Doug, I wanted to ask, how can, if the biggest challenge is finding suitable work, how can companies provide suitable work for interns, Doug? Is it the company's responsibility? Is it like K-12's responsibility or higher ed? If we look at kind of like, dual enrollment, early college initiatives, is it the intermediary responsibility, like your organization, to set that up? Or is it some combination of all three? How do we get at, that providing suitable work or meaningful work for interns? What's your take on that?
So the short answer is yes. So it's a combination of all of the partners working together. I think one of the things we've seen is internships and other immersive work-based learning opportunities. They're not transactional, they're relational. And so the good news to anybody thinking about doing this is there's really no right or wrong way. There's really no wrong way to do it. There's, all of the motivations Susan listed, whether it's to expand the pipeline, diversify the pipeline, find early talent. Like these are all great reasons to start programs. But that also means there's no one size fits all approach to creating and building and strengthening internship programs. So as the intermediary, we really see it as our responsibility, one, to bring all the interested parties together and then really create dialogue to think about what does a successful internship program look like? It's funny, a lot of the reflective questions that we ask up front look very similar to the list of challenges that were reported in the survey slide. So we think about what kind of work are you thinking about for interns? Do you have a specific population or pipeline of students that you want to recruit from? Are there certain skill sets you're looking for as prerequisites? These are all things that when you can think about that up front, you can start to think about who is the right partner at the table to help in the design process. So we have internship opportunities where the industry partner plays a huge role in, for lack of a better term, what's the curriculum, what's the day-to-day work of the interns. Often they will look at internal projects. They will look at things, I think a lot of companies in Kansas City, we often ask about what are the things 10 to 20 on your to-do list? So maybe not your top 5 priorities as an organization, but what are some of those internal projects or second layer projects that you maybe are struggling to find bandwidth to get to? And then we also talk to our K-12 partners and talk about when you're looking at career academy or career pathway models, do you have specific technical skills or specific experiences that students come to the table already developing? So one really quick example I'd provide is for one of our major research and teaching hospitals here in the region. We had a group of students that had gone through a biosciences program where they already knew slide preparation, they already knew pipetting, aseptic technique. When we talked to that hospital, those students were a perfect fit for an existing college internship program and research labs that when they heard about the skill sets that high school students had already developed, they were very open to expanding it and had a very successful expansion of that program to high school students. I think the other piece, when you think about higher ed, is depending on the larger context of implementation. So if a school district's got a really robust certification program with a community college partner or a dual enrollment program where students are already working with certain departments or certain majors, they're a really natural extension then to also think about where do students get off to a fast start in some of these internship opportunities. The other thing is we know a lot of our employers have really strong ties to some of our local colleges and universities and technical institutes. And so once students are in that internship program, if this is the spark, right? If they realize this is what I want to be doing after high school, how is the employer connecting them to some of those higher ed partners to hear about opportunities after high school graduation to not only get a jump on their next step, but to do so locally with an institution that's tied to that employer. So I think those are just some examples of how everybody comes to the table as we're looking at how to create the best partnerships possible.
Yeah, I really appreciate that last point too, Doug, because I think it makes sense when you look at how, especially in New York City with the New York City CEO Jobs Council and the CEO of JP Morgan Chase and EY working directly with CUNY, which is the City University of New York, engaged in curriculum to say what are students leaving with their associate's degrees, with the credentials, and tailoring them specific to some of the roles that exist within the organizations so that the young people have the internship opportunity matched with the actual in-school opportunity that prepares them for that role that they will take on. So I really like the way you phrase that. We've talked a lot about internships on this call, obviously, and that's what the point is. But it exists in kind of a larger ecosystem of what we would call work-based learning. And Taylor represents the one end of the spectrum of apprenticeships. So Taylor, can you just briefly describe kind of the difference between internships and apprenticeships? And then kind of talk a little bit about, there's a lot of increased attention on and resources devoted to expanding apprenticeships and modern youth apprenticeships. How do kind of high school internships fit into the work-based learning universe? And is there room to kind of expand both while maintaining kind of program quality and efficacy?
Mhm.
Yeah, great question, Kevin. Thank you for that. So just like by way of explanation, I guess, some quick differences between an apprenticeship and an internship. So internships, we've been talking here about paid internships, really high quality internships that have been designed really thoughtfully with pieces around mentorship and career development and in personal development for young people. But I think, as many of you on the line know, internships can really run the gamut in terms of quality, right? There's no sort of clear and common definition of what an internship is. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 years, it could be paid, it could be unpaid. It might have a classroom-based training component. It might be tied to kids learning, or it might not. And I say that not to be critical of programs that choose not to do those things, but to point out simply that there's a lot of variability in the internship model across the field. And that's okay. It can be used in lots of different contexts for different purposes, but that variability can be difficult to navigate for both young people and for employers. I want to be a part of an internship, but what am I going to get from it? It's often hard for them to figure this out because there are so many options and so many forms that internships can take. Apprenticeship is a more structured, more clearly defined model. There are elements to apprenticeship that a program must include to be considered an apprenticeship. And my small asterisk on that is that there's been a proliferation of states trying to create their own definitions of apprenticeships in the last couple of years, and that's really muddied the waters. But we'll put that to the side for a second, except to say that you really aren't supposed to use that term in this country if you aren't subscribed to a definition of elements for the program. And so those elements include some combination of paid on-the-job learning under the supervision of an employee mentor, related classroom-based instruction, which can be provided by CTE programs, community colleges, training providers, et cetera. Ongoing assessment against established skills and competency standards. So at the outset of the program, young people and the employers sign a piece of paper saying, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to learn, this is what you're going to get paid, and this is what's going to happen at the end, because apprenticeships typically culminate in some sort of portable industry recognized credential. And the really high quality programs also embed college credit into those programs so that they are set up to really be pathways to multiply the options available for young people at the end of the programs. All of that said, many very high quality internships do all of those things. And so I think I want to be very clear that while I am partial to the apprenticeship model, that doesn't mean that there aren't lots of killer internship programs out there that are doing, you know, above and beyond what we see a lot of apprenticeship programs providing. So to answer your question, Kevin, about is there room for both? Absolutely. And I think it would be irresponsible for me to suggest otherwise. I think another really key difference in the system, though, is the employer side of the equation. Employers come to internships, you told us, largely for altruistic reasons. I think a lot of employers come to apprenticeship with often for youth with an eye towards those altruistic motives. But they are long-term programs. Typically they last a year. In the state of North Carolina and a couple of other places, they can last up to 4 years. So these are really long-term commitments on the part of an employer and a young person. And so why they come to the table to develop these programs may be very different for employers. Apprenticeship tends to be a more deliberate talent strategy than an exposure strategy, right? And so that means you have different employers coming to the table, different sort of occupational profiles available to young people. And the good news about that is that it does mean there's room for both, right? Many of you live in states that have, I think, probably very clearly articulated work-based learning continuums. That's language that like only those of us in work-based learning world know. I guarantee you many of you have not opened up your state manual for work-based learning and understood like what falls into exposure and what falls into training or whatever language your state's adopted. But internships and apprenticeships tend to be towards the right and more intensive side of the work-based learning spectrum, meaning they're sustained, they last for a while, and they're designed to really expose young people to what it looks like to be in a workplace and the kinds of tasks that they might do in that occupation or industry. We often see internships and apprenticeships being paired together, internships being a sort of prerequisite or an appetizer, if you will, into apprenticeship opportunities, a great way for young people to sample the industry before they specialize. And because apprenticeships, again, can be long-term commitments, we do think those types of kind of like pre-introductions or like sniff tests, if you will, so they can get a sense of what it looks like in that field can be really important to ensure that they are ready and understand what they're committing to if they choose to do a longer term apprenticeship, and vice versa. It gives employers a chance to see. I will also say, and as a kind of a closing thing, point, apprenticeships can also be administratively challenging. And I think that's a little bit of a, maybe not a well-kept secret. Certainly not a well-kept secret if you work in apprenticeship, right? That's the thing people complain about endlessly, is registering these programs with the U.S. Department of Labor is impossible. It's not. I mean, happy to have a totally side conversation about that, but we hear that complaint a lot from employers. And I think we also see really nimble intermediaries using internships as a way to get businesses in the door to say, these are going to meet some of your needs. Internships with high school kids that are short may not meet others. And so apprenticeships are other options that you can pursue for particular occupations, whether they're for youth who are enrolled in high school at the time of program start, or for recent high school graduates who often don't even know apprenticeships are an opportunity for them to earn really high quality post-secondary training and start their careers in a lot of really high paying in-demand industries after high school. And Kevin knows I can talk about this forever, so I'm going to stop there, but happy to answer any follow-up questions or anything else that comes up from the audience. Thank you.
No, it's brilliant, Taylor. I really appreciate that. And I like the both and. I like that I'm going to use your sniff test language too when I'm out in the trail. I use your producers, active producers of talent instead of passive consumers, which I'll get to later.
Co-developers instead of consumers. That's what we would like employers to be, to co-develop talent rather than just consume it out of college. There are other places to look and other ways to build it.
Absolutely, but we can expound on that a little bit later. I wanted to get back to Deanna and ask, and thank you for that clarification, because I think those of us in this space sort of can understand internships, apprenticeships, but as we are reaching out and bringing more people into the fold, it's important to sort of make sure we're defining things. We don't assume people understand things and just use basic context to level set the conversation. But Deanna, I'm curious, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the highlights of the successes of the programs, either specific accomplishments of students or attributes of your program that other stakeholders might replicate? And also there was a question in the chat that you can answer directly for the entire audience if you'd like.
Okay, great. I'll answer the question first. So the question was for the Learning to Lead and the Skills to Succeed programs that we have, which are part of our impact hiring initiative. How are they funded? Well, one, the Learning to Lead program, which is for the high school students, is actually funded through partner organizations. And it spans across about 25 different cities in North America. So as an example, they're funded through government, through other nonprofits. I'll call off a few: Boys and Girls Club, the Union in Detroit, Grow Detroit's Young Talent, Education is Freedom in Dallas, Urban League in Tampa. So those are different types of other partner organizations that we partner with, that we pay for the program. We pay for the leadership that's training the program. We bring the students on site. We cover the off-site excursions, client visits, etc. But we partner with these other programs because they are programs that target students who may have been impacted by the digital divide from underrepresented communities. So that's the Learning to Lead program. For the Skills to Succeed program, which I've mentioned is majority are college students, Accenture pays those individuals. Accenture pays those college students because they are working for Accenture. They are working on client projects, and it's only right legally that we pay them and not, do any partnership or any of the above. And for that program, we have that Skills to Succeed college internship program across about 16 different cities within the U.S. So it's pretty large, when you think of a company across like Accenture that has over 50,000 employees in the U.S. I did want to mention, since Taylor did such an incredible job discussing apprenticeships. So our CEO, Julie Sweet, last year announced that 20% of our entry-level hiring would come through our apprenticeship program. So that's the third wheel of our impact hiring program. And how we manage our apprenticeship program is since 2017, we rolled out a program where we offer to young adults who have less than a 2-year degree. So the whole idea is we're not competing with the students who are pursuing 4-year degrees, but we're targeting the students that say, you know what, I need a certification. I want to focus on those and develop those in-demand skills, right? So right now, in-demand skills, there's some type of coding, there may be cloud, now it's AI, that's the big help. So the question is, how do we identify and align to what the in-demand skills are and students that are pursuing those skills as well. We offer a year program. It runs from anywhere from 3 to 12 months. It includes formal learning, on-the-job training, coaching to help apprentices build their skills and advance their careers. And they work on average about 40 hours a week. With this, they have a competitive compensation. So they have opportunities to network and work in teams and collaborate. They receive coaching and mentoring, and they have an opportunity to be converted over to a full-time employee after 1 year as an apprentice with Accenture. So to date, we have hired about 2,000, and as you can imagine, 2,000 apprentices. And as you can imagine, that number is going to grow now that Julie released last year that 20% of our entry-level hiring will be through apprentices. And I'm seeing that now, even through what we call our Skills to Succeed program, is because just in Dallas, as an example, the interns that I'm bringing on fall within that. Many of them fall within that apprenticeship requirement, right? So like they are not pursuing a 4-year degree, but they may have certain certifications or they have an associate's degree and so forth. So I think your question, so I know that was a lot of information, but I think your question was around like, so what are some of the benefits we're seeing? So what we're seeing is when we start, we're building a pipeline, right? We're building a talent pipeline that the very way you kicked off the discussion with seeing more diverse numbers, right? That we're pulling and people from different backgrounds and interests, right? We're positioning Accenture so that the people who are pursuing 4-year degrees can do different types of work, and some of that repetitive, maybe coding, some of those activities that someone only wants to specialize in, they can do that on a for their job, while the people who may be pursuing a 4-year degree can do a variety of different types of things because they've been trained to do that type of work. So our pipeline, we're starting with the very high school students all the way through young adults. So you can imagine we have a pipeline almost at every point, starting from 16 all the way to 24 years old. So that's how we're seeing that ripple effect. We're seeing the goodness of it all. And I'm actually been doing this role in Dallas long enough to see that some of our very high school students are now coming back as our Skills to Succeed college interns and/or apprentices, and then even hiring in with Accenture. So one story that I heard, one young intern who was a Skills to Succeed intern told me a couple of years ago that she was from an underrepresented community, obviously, and that she had no idea what Accenture was. She came through one of our partner organizations, afraid, scared, all the above. And now she's one of our top performers. She told me that if it wasn't for this opportunity, she would not have been able to buy a house. Her mom lives with her. So it has completely changed the trajectory of what her experience may have been, because she just had no idea. She had no understanding of what consulting was, that she could earn the type of money that she's earning now, and that she even qualified for it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love those stories because it speaks to sort of the overarching challenge, which is career stratification or occupational segregation, which is a whole nother ball of wax and another conversation for another day. But that story just really illustrates the power of that pipeline development. The follow-up questions were, is the Accenture's program in Washington State and in New Mexico? Is that one of the areas that you're operating in right now? If you know off the top of your head. If not, we can find out later.
Nope, I don't think so. Okay. Washington State would be, nope. I don't see Seattle on here, but Seattle, Washington.
Right.
I don't see, but I can ping someone while we're on this call to ask. Okay. I know not New Mexico. We don't have an office in New Mexico.
Okay. Good to know.
But we do have an office in Seattle, so I'll ask about Seattle while we're on this call.
Great. Thanks, Deanna. I appreciate it. So for the folks at Prep KC, either Susan or Doug can jump in. One of the aspects of the program that I really like to read about is the concept of the market value asset. Can you tell us a little bit about what a market value asset is, how you define that? And then are we seeing sort of any evidence of impact of those market value assets on students' trajectories and their career pathways?
Well, sure, Kevin. I'll probably take the first part of your question and toss it to Doug, maybe for the second part, the impact data that we have. But market value asset may be a term no one else, if you don't live in Kansas City, you may have never heard that term before. Prep KC spent about 5 years experimenting with the question, what can happen during high school or possibly during the whole K-12 pipeline that changes a student's trajectory after high school? And remember, we're working with a very concentrated set of urban communities with the typical demographics, 80 to 90% free reduced lunch eligible, so low income, students of color, English language learners, first generation college goers. And we were really interested in how schooling, typical schooling, could change the trajectory for kids. And so, and I really liked Taylor's phrase, I'm going to borrow that phrase, but what can we do to multiply a student's options after high school? So we spent about 5 years actually experimenting with our 20 urban high school partners, looking at how we could stand up wall-to-wall career academies, looking different. Every high school, every district wants to do it a little differently, but how could we start to make high school more meaningfully connected to what happens after high school, whether it's college, whether it's ready for the workforce, or some combination of those two things? And to boil it all down, we collected a ton of data. We tried a lot of things. We learned a lot of lessons. But at the end of the day, we drew our conclusions. We had those confirmed by an independent data analyst. But we found out that there were some affordable, scalable, and rather common sense assets that kids could earn during high school. And if I gave you 10 seconds, you would probably guess at least 3 of the 4. But obviously, for first-gen college goers, 9 or more dual credit hours, just the beginning of a transcript and a relationship with a higher ed institution, and the confidence that you can actually accomplish, college level work, an internship, well-structured. I think Taylor also mentioned that there's great variability in internships, and so we have a particular definition that we use for how many contact hours and the kind of accomplishments we'd like to see in an internship. And we've also gone on to design something similar to an internship that I've heard reference to in this conversation. We call it a client-connected project. So maybe upstream to an internship for a junior or senior that might be paid during middle school or early high school, these client-connected projects where kids get to connect with industry folks and solve a problem. Doug mentioned, problems that maybe they are interested in getting feedback on, but it's not on fire. So they're comfortable letting younger people kind of take the helm and work on solutions. So the third one, as I mentioned, is an industry credential. And we have worked at Prep KC to match some of the workforce needs, credentials that are industry recognized credentials. We learned some lessons as we dipped our toe into this across 2 states, Kansas and Missouri, that there are literally hundreds and hundreds of workforce credentials that people call workforce credentials, but from one business to the next, they may not recognize those credentials because many of them are kind of homegrown in that company or just not universally recognized. So we've gone through a process and we're continuing to work through what are the high value industry credentials for our population of kids that really give them a leg up after high school and really give them some choices and expand their options after high school. And the fourth one that we're continuing to work on is the opportunity to really activate. Some students have a real impulse for entrepreneurship. So really how to activate their entrepreneurship interests and really do something with some real structure and some real, I think, a product at the end of an entrepreneurship experience. And we're still kind of in our region still working on that. But those 4 assets, we decided around 2016, we said, if you look around, more and more, the data is showing that a high school diploma doesn't have much market value anymore. But there are assets that employers look for and that higher ed folks look for. And so we named them market value assets in 2016. And we just clicked along working with our high schools and kind of tracking in our data on our data platform, tracking the percentage and the number of high school graduates each year as we invested more and more in how kids had those opportunities during high school. Around the 18-19 school year, a foundation here in Kansas City decided that they wanted to kind of get in the market value asset business, and they have invested on a broader regional, I think now 34 school districts that are urban, suburban, and inner ring, kind of outer ring suburban, inner ring rural. And there's a kind of now about a 5-year-old movement to regionalize the concept of market value assets. And then more recently, Governor Kelly launched, when she was elected in Kansas Governor Kelly launched a Kansas Council for Education, and I had the opportunity to serve on the work-based learning subcommittee. And long story short, the state school board now has made recommendations that every high school in Kansas by 2028 should be graduating kids with these kinds of assets, some real connection to the workforce opportunities that kids would have rather than just a generic diploma. So that's kind of where we are with market value assets. We set a goal for ourselves at that time in 2019 that we would help our partner districts graduate at least 10,000 kids by 2025. So we've got another year and a half to hit that number, but we are on track for that and really excited about not only attaining that spot, but what's next after that. And I'll let Doug pick this up and talk about our data, but our big question for ourselves now is, okay, if we've got we started somewhere around maybe 20% of our kids, our kids in our partner high schools graduating with a market value asset, and we're up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% now. But what about the other 40% of kids? Those may be, maybe we picked the low-hanging fruit, and maybe there need to be additional programs, additional supports to move into that area of the work. So we may really have our work cut out for us. By 2030, we'd like to join our region in saying that 100% of our high school graduates should have one or more market value assets upon high school graduation. So we've been keeping a lot of data, and Doug will probably share some more of that.
Yeah, I'll quickly add, maybe for Taylor's benefit, we also absolutely would include pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs of a market value asset. They're just taking off here for high school students in Kansas and Missouri, so we're hopeful that we really see that grow in the coming years. I also dropped a link to the Kauffman Foundation, our foundation here locally that's really picked this up and amplified it regionally. Dropped a link into the chat that'll show you the kind of regional definitions for the criteria behind these market value assets. And then I'll very quickly share some of the data. I don't know if you can all see that, but we started taking a look at students who participate in some cohort-based programs that Prep KC offers to our partner districts, our career academies. We had a sample of about 950 students from the graduating classes of 2017 through 2021. Students who participated in these programs, demographically all very similar from the same high schools, same high school program. And as market value assets evolved, one of the kind of distinguishing factors in this group was we had a almost equally matched set of students who earned a market value asset in high school or did not earn one through these programs. So about 50-50. And we tracked these students through National Student Clearinghouse data after they graduated from high school. What you'll see is the dark blue bar is students who earned a market value asset in these programs. The bright yellow bar is students who completed the programs but did not earn a market value asset. And then the gray is the National Students Clearinghouse's national benchmark for 2019 for urban high schools across the nation. And so what we saw is all other things being equal, Prep KC students who earned a market value asset were more likely to enroll in college, more likely to persist compared to their peers who did not earn a market value asset, and they earned degrees at much higher rates than both their non-market value asset peers as well as the national benchmark. We think the other story that this data doesn't tell is we know particularly for students with industry recognized credentials and for some of our students with entrepreneurial experiences, college is not the first stop after high school graduation. So the workplace, where we are excited about both of our states building some longitudinal data systems that connect K-12 higher ed and workforce data, but we're not quite there yet. So our workforce successes are much more anecdotal right now than being able to track that at scale. But we think we're actually undercounting some of the success of students with market value assets. So continuing to watch that data to see how the pandemic shifts those trends. We all know that there's some big shifts going on nationally with post-secondary enrollment, trying to see how that plays out. But we think this is really a promising signal that market value assets are beneficial for our students once they leave high school.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. And those of you that are looking for some of the data, just again, click on the link that Doug put in the chat for some more information about that. So we are approaching the hour mark and want to be sensitive of time and allow for any questions for our distinguished panelists based on all the things that they've said so far. I obviously have more questions, but generally want to open it up to see if anybody had anything burning that they wanted to ask of our panelists.
I'll just answer the question for Seattle. So we would love to partner in Seattle for our Learning to Lead high school program. However, we do need a partner organization. So we were unsuccessful this year with identifying a partner organization who could pay the stipends, who would cover the stipends. So once again, that program, partner organizations identify opportunities to cover the stipends. So if you happen to be there and know of an organization, please send them my way. Would love to get that program back up and running in Seattle.
I second that. That'll be a goal. So hopefully this time next year we can reconvene and talk about who's propping it up in Seattle. That'd be great.
So I'm going to encourage some of our. Oh, is there echo? Sorry, I'm having all kind of internet problems today. But I am going to encourage our state leaders to raise their hand and come off mute to ask questions or to share some of the stories. So I see a number of the members of our State Leaders Network in the audience. So I'm especially encourage you, but anyone, we would love to have you participate in this dialogue.
So while we're waiting for somebody to dive into the pool, we have with us a young man from Kansas City, Devin Kraft, who has been both an intern and also a manager of an intern at an organization. And so I invite him to come off mute and introduce himself and kind of tell his story, because I think it's really relevant and talks a lot about the issues that we're discussing today.
For sure. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate the opportunity. And let me just say it's awesome to be able to participate in this webinar and see so many folks working to provide opportunities for students. I can kind of speak to all of the various layers of opportunities that you've spoke through, having participated in paid high school internships, as well as an apprenticeship, and then college internships later on. So my story starts in my junior year of high school. A local employer here in Kansas City, Cerner Corporation, which has since been acquired by Oracle, where I work today, actually, started a program called Cerner Scholars, which involved bringing a group of students onto the Cerner campus to do some, we called them blue sky problems, get to work with different Cerner associates and talk through some kind of work through projects and present at the end of the semester. The second semester in that program, we got to do more hands-on work with actual associates being assigned to do some smaller day-to-day tasks, being assigned to a team. But that summer, I had the opportunity to pursue a a paid internship as a high schooler working on the recruiting team. And that was an excellent opportunity as well. And the next year I continued on as a Cerner Scholar. Following that, I participated in a KCIT apprenticeship as part of with Cerner again. In that apprenticeship, there was an opportunity to pursue a 2-year degree at the Metropolitan Community Colleges. I pursued that. At the end of the apprenticeship, which consisted of 15 hours of work a week during the semester, then 40 hours of work a week during the summer, all of which was paid. After the end of those 2 years, I had the opportunity to stay on full time, but I elected to go on to a 4-year degree outside of the Kansas City area. So I was kind of forced to break off my apprenticeship at that point. But then I returned for summer internships the subsequent years. And I started out pursuing system engineer role, but my manager over those years encouraged me to pursue software development. So I decided to go after a computer science degree where I was attending college. And when I graduated, I started out at Cerner Corporation. As I mentioned, we've since been acquired by Oracle, but I'm a manager of a team of 15 developers, and we're lucky enough to have 2 Oracle scholars working with the KC Prep program on our team. And they're working on great projects. One of our scholars that I'm working with has had the opportunity to work with various technologies like GitHub, Oracle Database, Jenkins. So these are all things that are, there's different versions of them around software development industry, but one of the things that I think is most powerful about internships is it takes you out of the theoretical, generic learning that you're doing in school, and gives you a specific example to work through. And it really gives you the confidence to kind of say, you know, I did this one time, I can take those skills and apply them elsewhere to other examples. And yeah, I'm fortunate to have had the opportunities that I have, and I feel like it continues to pay dividends. So I'm happy to answer any questions about my experience or the interns that I'm managing today, or rather the Oracle scholars that I'm managing today. But just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and it's great to see so many folks working on this.
Devin, thanks for sharing. I really, really appreciate that. And I like the last point you said about the confidence and also the relevance, because I think that one of the things we talk about college and career readiness and these type of career connected learning opportunities is that it takes, again, the theoretical and makes it practical, and it gives young people relevance and something to kind of aspire to. I really, really appreciate that. I think we'll just keep the ball rolling because well, Scott raised his hand, but we didn't see too much in the chat. And I just did want to get to, there's a couple more questions I want to get to for the panel. But Scott, you had your hand raised. You wanted to chime in?
So what you're saying is you really want to get to your questions. That's where we're going.
I mean,
I got you, Kevin. I heard it. I heard something. I just wanted to say thank you as well. This topic has been huge throughout the years we've been doing our State Leaders Network. It certainly was something our founders, you heard, Leo Reddy, has really been championing as well. But really thinking through the different strategies for helping to encourage paid internships, having business role models that are out there doing it. So it's more than just something they're doing, as you said, it's not a philanthropic, it's not just for the good of things. It's actually building stronger communities. And so it's great to have some great examples of that and hear from you, Devin, as well, in terms of the impact it has on our lives. It's transformative. So just wanted to thank you on that. And yeah, so Kevin, go ahead, get going on those questions.
Hey, Kevin, as you're getting ready to do that, I just want to add kind of context to Devin's story, because we love his story, and it's really a great example. As Prep KC has been building this, what we call Pathways to Tech Careers, we've been working at that, and Devin's experiences actually precede some of that. He was kind of directly, involved in some work the company was doing before they reached out to Prep KC. But it has been really interesting as this program has evolved and been co-designed by Cerner, now Oracle. These young people, juniors and seniors in high school, and they collectively come from 7 or 8 of our 20 high schools. And we have a person on our team who really facilitates that experience at Cerner. But the kids can first semester be on the campus multiple days a week, just learning some of these computer languages and some of the tech practices, and kind of just observing what a high-tech workplace looks like. And by second semester, if they'd like, they can apply for a second semester internship and get assigned to work on a team of Oracle professionals by second semester. And those that are most successful are offered a paid internship, summer internship after that. So in some ways, the employer has the benefit of really incrementally watching how to match the kids' interest and skills to different parts of the talent needs in the company as the time goes on. And I will share one thing that I thought was really, really brilliant as Oracle worked with Prep KC to design and onboard this program. Our teacher, our staff person at Prep KC, who's a very skilled tech career person, they put him through the onboarding of the company, just like he was a brand new employee. And so he had the chance to really understand what a brand new employee, a young person, might be expected to know about, know how to do, know how to act, know how to talk. And by the time then he was coaching the kids through these stair-stepping them toward an internship, he really was a good coach for them because he really understood the company at a pretty deep level. So that was one of the tricks of the trade that we are now working on expanding to others.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, Susan. I really appreciate that. All right, so back to my friend Taylor. We talked again, active consumer, passive, or active producer, passive consumer. In your opinion, what's the best way to convince companies to become active producers of talent instead of passive consumers? What's the best way to respond to companies' concerns that they may not necessarily receive a return on investment on a high school internship because the student's not likely to be hired? Deanna from Accenture provided a great example of how that works, how somebody actually gets hired. But one of the things that we've heard both from our survey, but also from conversations with employers is, what's the value proposition? Are they going to stay in the manner that they would if they had that commitment in an apprenticeship? So what if we're out in the trail, we're trying to bring more employers to the fold, how do we then convince them, you need to be active producers of talent?
It's a great question. And I'm going to start my answer, I think, by building on something that Susan just said, and try to kind of expand how we think about the concept of return on investment, right? Businesses are really oriented towards, I put $1 into this program, what do I get out of it? Is it 44 cents on the dollar, 73 cents on the dollar, whatever it is? That is justified, I suppose. But I think one of the things that's hard about calculating return on investment is that there are lots of other benefits to companies that they don't necessarily calculate, and they can't really calculate. So the example that Susan just gave about working with young people being a way to actually build skills of frontline managers is a really important one. That's really hard for businesses to quantify, but the generation graduating from high school is the largest and most diverse generation that we've ever had in America. And businesses are going to need to learn very quickly how to incorporate them successfully into their workforces. And so opportunities to do that in a structured manner, like internships and apprenticeships, are a really important way for them to give folks exposure to younger workers and help them develop opportunities to serve them well. Not just necessarily as coaches, but as managers too. In general, though, Kevin, I think that if I had a really good answer to that question, I would not be working where I work, what I do. I would be retired by now, my feet up. But a couple things I'll say quickly, right? Like other countries that have done that really well have a much different way of organizing their economies. And they have very different relationships within industries, between industry leaders, industry associations at the national level and the regional level, and their education systems. So they have really formal ways that business was weighing in education decisions, both from a sort of program and curriculum development perspective, but also providing training as a part of a big kind of integrated economy and system. We don't have that. So one thing I think is important for folks who are leading these programs to understand is to what do businesses value? And altruism is a part of it, certainly. But above all else, they're there to make a profit. They're businesses, right? And so understanding how you can position work-based learning opportunities as a way to advance the kind of core goals of businesses is an important way to do that. And I think often from the education sector, we position work-based learning to businesses as like a favor. Can you do these? Can you do us and these kids a favor by opening your doors? And I totally understand the instinct there. But if I'm a business leader, whether I'm from a big company like Accenture or a small and medium-sized enterprise, which is, most of the businesses in our communities, they don't necessarily operate on the kind of margins they would need to constantly be opening their doors to just feel good about it. And so work-based learning that's positioned in a way to help their bottom line can be a much more effective way to get them interested. Now, we shouldn't design these programs only for businesses, right? We also have to ensure that there are protections in place so they're generating value for young people. But it's awfully hard to generate value for young people if you have no businesses willing to hire them. So finding that balance between meeting the business's needs and addressing young people's learning goals is the goal, right? And finding a way to find that synergy is kind of what you all do. I'll put a plug in for a paper a colleague of mine just wrote on exactly this topic, and she provides some ways to help, especially education institutions, understand that there's actually a really critical and sometimes uncomfortable sales component to this work. And she provides some guidance on how to think about that, some questions you can use, and some tips and tricks for intermediaries or schools or colleges that are trying to expand employer recruitment and engagement. So I'll drop that into the chat in just a sec.
Oh, perfect. Okay. And that's a report that she had already written. You can just drop that in the chat so we can all see. Excellent. Awesome. And then just to follow up to that, what's the one thing from a policy perspective, whether it's a local policy, state policy, or federal policy that could sort of address some of the challenges in increasing access to work-based learning programs?
That one's also for me.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So gosh, the policy context around work-based learning programs, it's kind of messy, isn't it? Yeah. So, when people often ask about that, I think that when people ask about that, there are a couple of dimensions that they're thinking about. One is around sort of the complaints or the concerns you get from employers around insurance, liability, et cetera. And then we get big questions around funding too, right? How does this work get funded? Where is it situated? I think that there's not a single policy lever right now that we could unlock that would dramatically accelerate the scale or sustainability of these programs. I don't think that that's out there, and we haven't found it yet. But I do think that states can be really thoughtful about making sure that work-based learning opportunities are valued in their education systems by thinking about accountability systems, by thinking about, and by that I mean, a lot of high schools in this country do not get credit for young people who exit high school and do anything other than college. Or the way they collect data around work-based learning is so kind of new that they're not able to disaggregate that data to figure out what opportunities are quality, who's doing what, who's where. And they often develop programs without a purposeful strategy for engaging employers in the development of those, right? You could develop the very best internship in the world, but if there's no employer in your community who is actually able to hire or interested in hiring for that internship or apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship, you put in a lot of effort for naught. So that's not necessarily a policy issue, but I do think that there could be policy improvements to strengthen education systems cooperation with the private sector. I've lost the second half of your question in my rambling, Kevin. Did I get it?
No, I think you got it. I mean, I think the main one of the things that we've seen was in our report, we highlighted a small employer in Indiana. And I think when I say small employer, they may have had 20 employees. And so there was really no incentive or business reason for them to hire an intern. But because the state had expanded its wage subsidy program that was specifically for college internships to high school internships and apprenticeship programs, then that was the trigger that said to them, you know what, we're going to get one, high school intern, as a way, kind of to your point about businesses being for profit. It helped them with brand awareness. It also is something good, enable us to connect with the community. And they hired an intern and then had a 50% wage subsidy from the state of Indiana to support that. Without that, they wouldn't have hired because they had no clear business need.
Yeah.
So I think that that's one of the things that sort of like gets at the, there's obviously huge multinational corporations, but the majority of businesses might be those small to medium sized. And how do we engage those folks in these types of opportunities and provide ways for them to do it when, one, it may not be on their radar, and two, they may not see the business need, but could be prompted with an incentive.
Yeah. Right? Interestingly, Kevin, I would say in the aggregate, there's actually not a lot of evidence that wage subsidies or tax, not wage subsidies, tax incentives around work-based learning are effective at the state level. A lot of businesses will say they came to the table because of a tax incentive, but very few of them actually then claim the incentive that brought them to the table in the first place. And you mentioned wage subsidies. I'm a little torn on that. On one hand, I think that they're like a crutch for employers. I think that employers should want to invest in these programs and they should have skin in the game. On the other hand, I also understand that we need to incentivize employers to hire young people, and especially young people who are least well served by current systems. So one of the interesting things we've seen in one state we work with, they had we're going back and forth between a wage subsidy. They had a tax incentive. They wanted to scrap it. They thought about a wage subsidy, but decided actually, rather than doing the wage subsidy, we will subsidize the training. And so they provided upfront to employers funding to subsidize the training costs for young people in their apprenticeship programs, so that those young people could essentially get a head start on associate's degrees at no cost to them or the employer. And that did change behavior. So I do think there's an argument for that upfront investment rather than the many policy levers that people are like, just cut the taxes, give them a tax benefit. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I hear you. Thank you for that. Scott, you had your hand raised.
I just wanted to respond to Taylor, to some of your comments, and Jen's already done it as well. Thank you, Jen Stein, for that. But I think that there are, as we talk about small companies, the wage incentives, that they don't necessarily have the bandwidth within the company to start something, right? And so what we have seen is with intermediary supports involved, a combination of intermediary plus some financial support can help. But we've also seen that once, like we've seen some companies, they'll use the WIOA dollars to get started, but then when they realize, as Jen was saying, how much talent there is from these youth, they actually say, forget that, we need to pay them a higher wage. So it's sort of I think it's an interaction. I think just the incentives itself isn't enough, but if we have intermediary support systems to help them connect and have a positive experience, I think it can really take off. We really want them to see just how talented the youth are today, because it is amazing. We're finding at the university level as well. The skill sets are incredible.
Yeah. We quickly say a disclaimer: we don't have consistent access to the employer side data, so this isn't something we measure at scale. That being said, I know some of the metrics that we've heard that when employers are trying to quantify this, it can depend on the purpose of work-based learning, but we've heard kind of metrics like how many applications are we receiving from graduating seniors. If it's a company that's hiring directly from high school, they're looking at shortening time to degree if you require a specialized certification or a degree to get hired, and what percentage of students from work-based learning are going to preferred higher ed institutions where they do a lot of their hiring. And then two things that I think we've also heard is they're looking at internal training costs for new hires. So does somebody who has some of the work-based learning experience, essentially, do they hit the ground running more quickly than a typical new hire? And then the last one is retention metrics. So are students that are engaged in some sort of work-based learning, are they actually staying longer past that first year or 3-year mark compared to students who may not have had access? So again, huge disclaimer is we don't track that as an intermediary because we don't have consistent access to the data. But when we talk to employers that are trying to quantify that, those are some of the metrics they often reference.
Yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate that. And we're almost at time. We got about 10 minutes. So I'm going to actually wrap up the last question with the typical last panel question, which is the Harry Potter, or like those of you that are older, 8 Children of the 80s, A Wrinkle in Time, or Lloyd Alexander, any sort of fantasy magic related. If you had a magic wand, what's the one thing that you would do to make these types of opportunities available to more students? And I'm going to start with you, Deanna. You kicked us off with a great description of what's going on at Accenture, and so you can lead us off at the end. Like, what's one thing you would like to see or would do to sort of expand your program, enhance it, bring it to more cities? What would that be?
That's interesting. I would probably, obviously expanding the program, but I would like to see an all hands deck, right? On these types of offerings. So I saw someone from, I think, South Bend Chamber ping. I think it's important to have your chambers involved, higher ed, the high schools, businesses, all collaborating on how to solve for opportunities for our students, because oftentimes our students get lost when they leave high school. And there's no way to track them. You don't know where they're going, what they're doing. You may have invested in a mentorship program with them, and then you never hear from them again. You just don't know what happened, right? So I feel like there should be an all hands deck with one, just the sheer ownership of stewardship, I guess is the best, from a company, from all players in the game. Because what we do recognize is that college is outpricing. The cost of college is outpricing most people in America. So the question is, how are we building these skill sets and ensuring that those who cannot or do not have an interest, right, in the 4-year program, how do we get them into the right educational / corporate America jobs? And I say that because even the service jobs are turning to be more technical now. So service jobs are changing. So those jobs are basically the people, we're not going to have enough for the service jobs so it's going to leave a lot of people in this digital divide. It's going to leave a lot of people without opportunity. So if I had it my way, I would just say, you know what, everyone comes to the table from all different groups and says, how do we solve this? And this is what we're going to do, and this is what we have to do. So whether it be funding, whether it be opportunities, whether it be creating programs that are scalable, and that, what's wrong with like creating programs that different companies can pick up and say, okay, I'm going to run this same Learning to Lead program at my company as well. I'm going to fund it, and we're going to work with partner orgs or fundraisers or whomever to provide the stipends for the learning program. But all high school students will not leave high school without some form of opportunity to learn what it looks like to do work in corporate America, or in a technology role for that matter.
Yeah, I like that. You can almost think of it, envision it as like professional development for the corporate class, or like a showcase where they could go and like a science fair with the baking soda volcano, but instead of the baking soda volcano, you have all of the companies and their Learning to Lead programs. I really like that. Yes. Susan, you're next. If you could have a magic wand, what would you do?
Well, that's such a great question, and my mind is just racing. But I think because I'm imagining that everyone talking here with us today passionately believes in these kinds of programs, apprenticeships, internships, the equity of opportunity that we're all trying to create, as I think Deanna just so elegantly talked about. I would wave my magic wand and require a very smart merger of K-12 higher ed and labor department data. Because if we could get a very smart integration of data systems and systems that we could query, it would demonstrate that these are some of the most effective things we could be doing in public education, some of the most effective things we could be doing as a country to build out talent and to create more equity of opportunity in our talent potential, in our talent base. It's been really hard. Both of our states have been working on them for multiple years. But if we could do that, I think it would be very convincing that this is the road that we need to be, where we need to be investing and participating. I also, my second magic wand would be something like a gap year after high school where everyone is required to be engaged in something like an apprenticeship or a paid immersive internship. Because if we could figure out how to do that for everybody, I think we'd also elevate individuals, our kids, our young people, and elevate our workforce talent.
I like that. Doug.
I'm going to be wearing my operations hat, and I'm going to pull from Star Trek, and I would wave my magic wand and make sure we all had teleporters. So one of the biggest barriers, quite frankly, is getting students to and from employers. And transportation challenges are real across the board for families, for schools, for employers. So in the absence of teleporters, I think my email's in the chat. If you have innovative solutions you're using to get students out to work-based learning or to push work-based learning into schools, we'd love to hear them. Kansas City's amazing, but we're playing catch up on mass transit options. And so that is just a very day-to-day barrier for us in terms of scaling the work.
Awesome. And Taylor, take us home.
I would like to cheat here and just +1 on things that everyone else said. But I think one thing that I would add to the mix, gosh, I'm a little bit at a loss for words on this, but I guess one thing that I will say that's like yes to all of these things, and I wish that with my magic wand that we could make it add capacity at all of the organizations that are doing this work, especially playing the translational roles between business and education. And I say that because one of the biggest challenges we see is just the sustainability, not financial sustainability, but leadership sustainability in programs, both on the education side and the employer side, that you get a good thing going and then people leave for one reason or another. And it's very hard to get these programs to be institutionalized at any kind of scale when you're constantly rebuilding relationships and constantly trying to re-socialize the concept with new people. So if I could just like find a way to keep people in their roles for a little while longer, especially leaders and maybe get more leaders like those from orgs like Accenture, and then some of the business leaders that have posted in the chat, I would, I guess I would have more like a what do you call it? I rubbed the lamp with 3 wishes in mind instead of a wand, but at any rate, that's my wish list.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your everybody's time. Thank you so much to our brilliant panelists. I really value the efforts, the work that you do. Want to provide a platform to elevate you and the great work that you do, and bring more people into the